Hey, this is Eric Fisher, and this episode is made possible in part by me and other listeners like me. I have a tight budget, but I choose to make a $3 donation each month to make sure that these great shows continue. Making a donation is easy. Just go to generallyspeakingpodcast.com and click on the PayPal donate button. I don't even have to have a PayPal account to do it. And now, enjoy the show.
Talk shoes. Recorded live. This is an interactive podcast designed for audience participation. Come talk, text chat, or listen live at TalkShoe.com.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the podcast Answer Man podcast. This is a podcast production of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. My name is Cliff Ravenscraft, and I've been podcasting since December 16th, 2005. And I started back then with one single podcast devoted to the hit ABC show Lost. And since that time, I now produce, actually this will be my sixth self-produced podcast. And in the past year, our network has now served more than 500,000 downloads. So you're asking yourself, okay, Cliff's got another podcast. What's this one about? Well, I think the title of the show, Podcast Answer Man, may give you some indication, but I do want to make a couple notes about what this podcast is. First off, this is the official step that I am taking to transition podcasting from as a hobby over to podcasting for for an income, part-time employment. In fact, Stephanie and I have been talking, my wife Stephanie and I have been talking, and we have now figured it out that podcasting is very much a part of my life, and I'm actually going to be scheduling a minimum of 15 to 20 hours a week to podcasting. And this has been possible through quite a few turns of events. We have some wonderful listeners who help support the Generally Speaking Podcast Network with monthly donations and one-time donations via PayPal and sending payments to our P.O. Box in Hebron, Kentucky. And that has been a tremendous blessing to help cover the cost of bandwidth. And recently, through some cooperation with TalkShoe.com and doing some live podcasts there, it's enabled me to receive an income, a very small income at this point, but definitely not enough to necessitate 15 to 20 hours a week. But one of the things that I'm just concerned, or that has concerned me, is that I can't stop thinking about podcasting. And so I have decided that in conjunction with producing podcasts, I'm also going to be starting on the side podcast consulting, and so hopefully I can use this podcast as a method of answering commonly asked questions that I get in the emails, and I can actually answer those questions rather than answering one person on what's the best tool to use to do this if I'm starting a podcast, and just answering that to that one person. I'd like to answer those questions here in this podcast so that the multitudes of people who listen to this will have the benefit of those answers. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping to do, but I'm hoping that this podcast will attract a certain type of individual, actually 3 different types of individuals, but specifically for podcast consulting, people who are either considering podcasting for personal use, business use, or ministry use, that they might be interested in hiring me on for one-on-one podcast consulting, either by phone or in person. So if you're interested in some podcast consulting work, just give me a call, and I'd be happy to arrange that with you. And you can email me at cliff@ravenscraft.org, and I'll share that with you again at the end of this show. Now, let's see here. one of the things that I have decided to do is, obviously I want to do some podcast consulting, and hopefully I'll be able to do that for a fee that would pay for the time that I devote to doing that on a one-on-one basis. But I don't want to only share the experience I have in podcasting for a fee. God has tremendously blessed me with a passion and some gifts that just have come natural in the area of podcasting, and I don't want to only just sell that. So I wanted to have an avenue or an outlet where I can come and freely give advice and help answer some questions for people who are trying to do what I started just a year ago. And so that's why I'm here with this podcast. And this podcast, just like all the other podcasts of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network, will be free for download. There is no fee, and this show is listener supported, just like all of our other shows. Occasionally, we may have a sponsor. And I just want to let you know that I make no promises regarding commercialism or anything like that. In fact, I'm sure that how to incorporate commercial sponsors into your podcasting, if that's something you're looking to do, may be a future topic of this show. But anyway, really, I have a desire to help people, individuals, learn how to get into podcasting, whether that be podcasting your own personal passions, such as a favorite TV show that you watch, or maybe you have a hobby of maybe it's RC airplanes or hobby helicopters, or whatever your passion is, and you want to just share your knowledge with people and find other like-minded individuals out there. I think that would be excellent. And I will tell you that if you're a personal individual who wants to get into the field of podcasting, it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you are able to listen to this podcast, chances are you have everything you need already to start podcasting tomorrow. Actually, you could start podcasting today if you knew how. And it doesn't matter what your budget is. Maybe you have no money whatsoever. I'm telling you, you can start a podcast with absolutely no money starting out. Absolutely, all you need is a telephone and a connection to the internet, and it doesn't even have to be your own computer. So there's no boundary out there other than just the knowledge of how to do it, and that's why I want to help you as an individual. Now, some of you out there are basically you're in the business industry. Either you're a corporation, a small business, and you've heard about podcasting, and you've heard about the fact that other businesses are now using podcasts as a tool or a method of reaching out and communicating with their customers or clients. And it is a very effective tool for doing just that. In fact, I'm an insurance agent full-time, and one of the things that we're going to be doing in our agency is doing a podcast answering frequently asked questions and little-known facts about insurance coverage for our clients, and we'll be hosting that on our website. So podcasting is an effective tool for providing just an additional means of having a relationship with your clients or customers that can really put a competitive edge over top of those who do things similar to you that do not make use of this special medium of connection with them. And so if you are a business and you're looking to start getting involved into the field of podcasting, then this is a great podcast for you to listen to as well. And of course, I can't tell you just how much it has blessed me to know that the podcasting that myself and my wife have done over the last year have really helped to move people along in a spiritual journey of their own. And my wife and I share very openly our faith, that we are believers in Jesus Christ, and that's very much a part of who we are. We don't ever push that fact, and we don't ever try to coerce people into believing the way that we believe, and we don't ever ask anybody to change. We just share what we believe sometimes, and we're just really real and authentic. And as a result, ministry has occurred through podcasting. And so perhaps you might be involved in a leadership position of your local church, or perhaps you have a ministry that is outside of the local church, and you might want to find out how you can use podcasting as a valuable means for building relationships with people outside of the church walls. I will tell you, I could give you tons of examples of how that's happened over the past year. So, who is this podcast designed for? Who is it geared to? 3 groups of people. There are the people who know either little or nothing about podcasting, but they would love to start podcasting if they only knew how, and if they only knew they could afford it. So if you're somebody that knows little to nothing about podcasting, this podcast is just for you. And then the second group of people that it's geared toward are people who have got their feet wet. They've either started to research podcasting, they're starting to hear words like RSS feed, or maybe you've even produced 1 or 2 or even 5 or 6 shows. And you're just looking for advice on how to save money on bandwidth, or how to find equipment at a very inexpensive cost versus going to your local audio equipment store and paying 3 times as much. This podcast is going to be excellent for you because I'm going to share with you all the things I learned the hard way. And of course, there may be an occasional professional podcaster or a very seasoned podcaster that comes and stumbles across this feed or this podcast, and you'll be thinking to yourself, my gosh, this guy calls himself the Podcast Answer Man. To be honest with you, I just needed to come up with a title for this show. And it sounded a whole lot better than the GSPN Podcast Consultant podcast. So I just stuck with the Podcast Answer Man. In no way do I know everything there is to know about podcasting. In fact, professional and seasoned podcasters may even skulk at me if I ever even attempted to fool you into thinking that I know everything or even a lot about podcasting. I've only been into this for 1 year. Now, relatively, when you consider the length of time that podcasting's been around, that's pretty much half of its lifespan almost. And so, yes, I do have some experience, but there are people with a lot more experience than me out there, and maybe you're one of those individuals. And rather than tune out, I'm going to invite you to go along with us on this journey of the Podcast Answer Man podcast, because one of the things I want to do is bring in listener questions. I want to bring in questions from people who have specific needs for equipment or circumstances that they have where they need answers to how to go about doing certain things when it comes to podcasting. And the truth is although this is going to be called the Podcast Answer Man, the truth is I'm not going to have all the answers for everybody. And so I'm going to rely on people who have been more seasoned or been into podcasting much longer than I have. And if that's you, you will be very helpful to me and to the people who listen to this if you stick around and supply us with your feedback either by email or voicemail. And so I very much hope to gain all 3 of those groups of individuals into this podcast as far as subscribers. Now, some other things that I hope to work into a format eventually are podcasting news, podcasting tips, some how-tos, some advice, and answers to your questions. And to be honest with you, I've kicked off and launched enough podcasts to know that rather than try to establish a format in the beginning and then just see it all change anyway as the natural flow goes along, I've decided to just come up with the concept of this podcast and then let us, once the dust kind of settles from the first 2 or 3 episodes, I'm sure we'll slowly glide in and we'll settle right into a natural format for this podcast. So hang in there with me as things get a little bumpy here in the beginning, the first few episodes, and I'm sure that by episode number 10 of the Podcast Answer Man, this show will sound completely different than this first episode, and it'll be better for it. All right, so we do have the first episode here of let's see here, the Podcast Answer Man. And one of the things I want to do is immediately touch on something that might interest all three of the groups of people that I have mentioned previously in the introduction to this podcast. And the first thing I want to do is answer a question from Edith Baker. Now, Edith Baker is a longtime listener of the Generally Speaking podcast network. In fact, she was one of the very first listeners to the Weekly Lost podcast. Now, the Weekly Lost podcast currently has 12,000 listeners from all over the world when Lost is on. So it's a huge audience. It's been a tremendous blessing to have listeners from all over the world listening to that podcast. And Edith Baker was one of the very first. In fact, I remember her emailing me after our second or third episode of the Weekly Lost podcast, and she said something to the effect that you have to continue podcasting about Lost. And it was really her encouragement that really made me say to myself, okay, well, let's just devote this one podcast to Lost and go with that. And then if I want to branch out into some other topics, I'll do that later. And here I am 6 podcasts into the network. So Edith Baker, I want to thank you and give you your due credit for your encouragement of podcasting in my life. And through this podcast series, I will certainly give credit to many, many other people as we go along. Anyway, Edith Baker wrote this question. She says, "Hey Cliff, what is a good method to use when 2 podcasters want to do simultaneous podcasts with each other, but are 200 miles or more away from each other? I heard some podcasters who do well with Skype, but some do not. Any help you have would be great. I'd be grateful for, Edith." Anyway, Edith, that's an excellent question. And one of the things I will tell anybody who's considering podcasting, unless you like to talk a whole lot like Cliff does, it's probably a good idea to have a co-host. And it's not always easy to find somebody that wants to co-host with you locally. Maybe it's very difficult for you to find somebody who shares your passion, who lives in the same neighborhood or city, that can come over on a regular basis and podcast with you. And if that's the case for you, then a co-host that's 200 miles or more away may be the only option you have. Now, Edith, the question I'm going to pose back to you is whether or not you want to have live listener participation involved, number one. And number two, another question you'll need to ask yourself is, what are my concerns as far as audio quality? Is my content going to be good enough? And my knowledge, as far as myself and my co-host, is our knowledge and depth of understanding and being able to clearly communicate that knowledge to a group of people, is it going to be able to compensate for a very low audio quality podcast? Because I will tell you, there are some very low audio quality podcasts out there, and if the content's not great, you may get some listeners who will check in. But if the audio quality is not great and the content isn't superb, they'll soon check out. So my suggestion, since you don't have anything in here mentioned about bringing in listeners live, I want to suggest something to you. And that is, go ahead and use Skype. You obviously are familiar with the term, and I know for a fact that you've used Skype to speak with me before and join in on some of our live shows. So I know you're familiar with Skype, and I know exactly who you're considering podcasting with as a co-host. Now, one of the things I'm going to suggest that you do is use Skype for the two of you to be able to communicate with one another as you're recording the podcast. Now, what I am going to suggest that you do for audio quality's sake for your podcast is to do two things. One, to make this really work effectively. Actually, no, let's just forget about that, because I forgot you can edit out 2 multi-tracks at the same time. So anyway, the individual that you're looking to podcast with, knows about audio editing software such as Audacity. Now, we'll get into Audacity and recording software and editing in the future. And if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about that as a listener to this show, send me in an email or call in a listener voicemail on our listener line and ask that question, and I'll immediately respond within the next podcast episode, depending on how many questions we have ahead of there. But anyway, what I'm going to suggest that you do is have this individual, your co-host, help you to download a copy of Audacity and get that installed on your computer. And what I'm going to suggest that you do is, and I'm going to quit saying what I suggest that you do, because that's getting a little repetitive and it's driving myself crazy. So I'm sure it's driving everybody else crazy anyway. So anyway, what you want to do is each of you have Audacity running. Audacity is absolutely free, or whatever audio recording program you want. It doesn't have to be Audacity. But anyway, both of you get set up to where you are speaking into a microphone into your computer that is being recorded as you speak. Now, you can probably do this and record in the background at the same time that you're using the same microphone to speak to the other person on Skype. It should be able to, your sound device should send the audio to both your audio capture device and also out to Skype. Now, the problem that most people run into is when they try to bring in the person who's on Skype into your podcast with you. But I'm not even going to tell you that you should do that at this point. What I want you to do is both of you are recording locally, and you're just using Skype to kind of cue off of one another. And so you have your conversational style throughout your podcast. And the one thing you want to do is when you start your show, you both want to hit start. And it doesn't matter if you hit the start button on the recorder at the same time or not. That doesn't matter. What does matter, however, is that you do something to sync up. My suggestion is to count to 15 together at the same time. So what I would suggest that you do is you both hit record. Let's just say your co-host just hit record. Now you hit record. Now both of you are being recorded on your prospective computers there. And so count to 15. 1, 2, 3. You're counting together. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And the reason why you want to count up to 15 is because you want to do it at a rhythm to where you guys are saying the numbers at the same time together. This is going to be important because whoever's more tech savvy is going to take your audio track and bring that. We're gonna have you save your audio track, upload it to a free web server, and then let your co-host download that track that you recorded locally, which is a very high-end quality of your audio voice. Now on her computer, she's going to download that. She's going to import that and put it side by side with your track, and she's going to match up where you guys counted together. And then from that point forward, all she has to do is to allow those two things to stay side by side. And if you want to edit the podcast, she can edit it from there. And so that's my suggestion. So what is a good method to use? My method would be use Skype to kind of have the conversation so you can cue one another in as far as thoughts through the conversation, but to record locally and then mesh the two tracks together and to make up the whole podcast. And then, of course, if you want to do editing, you can do that as well after you have those synced up. So hopefully that answers your question. If that was too technical, share this with your co-host. I'm certain that your co-host, I know who it is, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're looking for something that is less of an audio quality, email me back and let me know. And I have an option for that, and it'll be TalkShoe, and I'm sure I'll talk about TalkShoe in the near future as well. So that answers Edith's question. Now, next up, I want to reach out to another demographic of our listeners, and that is somebody who is dabbling in podcasting. And in fact, I just got an email, and I'm pulling it up now in my Gmail account here. A little advertisement for Gmail, although they're not paying for this. Let's see here. I just opened up a forum registration request. Okay, Megan from Tustin, California. She says, "Hi, Cliff and Stephanie. Megan from Tustin is now Megan from What to Feed the Kids podcast. My first show is up on iTunes. It's called What to Feed the Kids and subtitled A Podcast About Kids and Food." And she wrote a little message to my wife, Stephanie, and she said, "Stephanie, you and the Lost podcast got a mention in my first show. Your disliking for scrambled eggs with ketchup got me thinking. I'm not crazy about the dish now, but as a kid, ketchup was the only way I would eat scrambled eggs. Turns out my daughter likes it too. I sure could use some input from the two of you, whichever does the cooking in your home." That would be my wife, Megan. Anyway, the premise of my show is that I'm no expert, just a regular mom trying to figure out this parenting thing with an emphasis on kids and food. I'm sharing what has been working for me and would love to hear from other parents on what's working for them. Now, Megan, I'm going to do you a little service here, and I'm going to give you a free plug and invite all of the listeners of this podcast to go to whattofeedthekids.com and listen to Megan's first podcast episode, which is out there. And in fact, I'm going to play for you right here just a little bit of the introduction of her first show.
Coming to you from Mickey Mouse's backyard in sunny Southern California, this is Megan, and you're listening to What to Feed the Kids for Tuesday, December 5th.
You told me if you want to grow up to be big and strong, you should listen to this song. If you want to be
I'm a wife and a mom of 2 kids. Will is 30 weeks old, that's almost 7 months, and Rosemary is almost 23 months old. I'm not a chef, I'm not a nutritionalist, I'm just a mom trying to figure out how to get some good food into my kids, and I'm going to share what works for me. I would love it if you would contact me and let me know what's working for you.
Alrighty. Well, Megan, that sounds excellent. For your very first podcast, I think you did exceptionally well. Now, for those of you who listened to that first podcast, there are already a couple things that I could think of to help give you some constructive feedback that would be beneficial to you. And if you're interested in hearing those, just email me back, and I will be glad to do that. Otherwise, I'm not going to say anything here, other than I just want to commend you on getting the concept together, going through all the steps of registering the domain, and putting your first podcast out there. It does not matter what your first show sounds like. In fact, people will be very forgiving of your first show and understand that it's your very first show. And so I think you did an excellent job with it. I listened to the whole thing, and I think you have a great idea there. And I think there's going to be an audience out there that will be very interested in what you have to share. And I'm hoping that parents of very small children will go and subscribe to your show and contribute lots of feedback and help you get going. And if you're interested in, if you have any other questions or anything like that getting into this, feel free to email me or give us a call on our listener line at area code 859-795-1959. That's area code 859-795-1959. Call in, email me, and with any questions you have, and I'll try to get them into the Podcast Answer Man here. Just so you know, the Podcast Answer Man, the GSPN, or Generally Speaking Podcast Network listener line, that is subject to change. So if you're listening to this very first episode months after it's been recorded and released, just so you know, if you call that number and it doesn't work, it's because right now, as I'm recording this on December 8th, I'm considering changing that number to a different number so that it'll be actually recorded locally at the house. And anyway, just so you know. Now, for the third demographic of listener, the professional podcaster out there, I want to share with you a minute and a half clip from Leo Laporte. And I had the very distinct honor of talking with Leo Laporte 2 times within the same week. Now, this guy is a podcasting celebrity of the greatest magnitude. And to personally one-on-one have a conversation with him was just a total delight. And as a podcaster looking to get into this more than just a hobby, it was like a dream come true, if you will. And one of the questions I asked Leo was, hey, I'm looking to, I'm in the market for a very professional sounding microphone. And I asked him, Leo, if you're not familiar with who Leo Laporte is, go to leoville.com, and there should be a biography or something about him. But he's been in broadcast radio for, I think, 30 years. And he's been in television. I first learned about Leo Laporte from Tech TV and listening to or watching him on the Screensavers and Call for Help. And then basically he's the one who introduced me to the concept of podcasting with his This Week in Tech podcast. And so knowing his radio broadcast background, I asked him, I get the opportunity to talk with Leo Laporte. So what am I going to do? I said, Leo, listen, I'm in the market for a very professional quality microphone. I'm thinking anywhere between $300 to $500. What should I get? And he says, Cliff, there's only one microphone out there that I'm going to suggest that you go get. It's the Heil PR40. That's HEIL PR40. And I think you can get that at heilsound.com. In fact, if you go to my personal blog at ravenscraft.org, that's ravenscraft.org, you can see that I recently posted back on, I think, December 5th or somewhere right around there, and have a nice picture of the box that it came in. And I'm actually talking on my Heil PR40. Wow, that was a popped P there, wasn't it? Anyway, I'm talking on my Heil PR40 right now. Now, the folks that are listening to this live in TalkShoe can't hear the beauty that is this microphone picking up the deepest voice that I have in this microphone. I feel like I could do with this microphone. I feel like I could do those those voiceovers for movie trailers. In a land far away, there was a podcaster. His name was Cliff. He wanted to quit his day job, and he wanted to go to podcasting full time. So anyway, that was a little bit between the voiceover guy from the movies and Captain James T. Kirk from the Enterprise. So anyway, I had the honor of talking with Leo Laporte, and I got this awesome broadcast quality microphone. And then I was involved in an interview with Podcast User Magazine today, and had the opportunity to talk with him again. And in the interview that we did together with some other podcasters, Leo had this to say when talking about how he works out live recordings with TalkShoe. Now, again, I will talk a little bit about TalkShoe in the future. If you don't know anything about TalkShoe and you're interested in learning more, I definitely want to encourage you to ask me that question, and I will certainly get to it. But let me go ahead and play for you how Leo described this afternoon in the interview how he interfaces with TalkShoe on the telephone and records locally.
I have basically a studio here. Amber who's my co-host, comes in via Skype into the studio. That's how we did the podcast before. She's in Toronto. I'm in California. So I can record her off Skype through, I go through a mixer and I record, I have a FireWire out on the mixer, a Macchionics, and that goes into Audition on a PC. So I record multi-track there. And then all it took to add TalkShoe to the mix was to get a phone hybrid. I bought, JK Audio makes a fairly affordable, Telos makes the high-end phone hybrids that you see in radio stations. But JK Audio makes one called the Broadcast Host. It's about $500. It's got a DSP in it, and what a hybrid does is allows you to interface to a phone effective radio style effectively. It has very smart switching so that it you don't get echo, you don't get feedback from your voice and so forth. Sure. So I use the hybrid to dial out to the TalkShoe bridge when we're beginning the show. I feed that phone hybrid from my local audio, which means me and Amber, and that's being fed our conversation and any guests we have via Skype. That's being fed back to the TalkShoe client, and then I also take from that hybrid any phone calls that we take on TalkShoe, pass that back through the mixer, and that goes into the mix too. So I have 3 channels. I have a Skype channel, my local channel, and a call channel. And that gets mixed down for the Tuesday release of the podcast. So that's a high-quality version, also somewhat edited version of what you hear when you listen to the stream.
Okay, well, that was, again, a part of an interview that I was involved in with Leo Laporte for Podcast User Magazine. I think it'll be available in next month's issue, and it's a free magazine for podcasters. And so if you're interested in that, go to podcastusermagazine.com and look for next month's edition, and you will see Cliff Ravenscraft and Leo Laporte and several other podcasters mentioned in that article. And it's an article devoted to TalkShoe. And so I'm very much looking forward to reading what they actually do write about Cliff and Generally Speaking Podcast Network. So anyway, it's obvious that Leo has some high-end equipment. In fact, this JK Audio broadcaster box, $495, I think it is something that I would very much like to be putting some money aside for. So we'll see how that goes as far as the income from this podcasting. And one of the things I was doing is playing around with my own kind of telephone interface. And before I mentioned on my blog, it was December 6th that is it was where the post is from on my ravenscraft.org. And also on December 6th, if you look at the other post I made that day, it's called Cliff's TalkShoe /podcast telephone interface. Not as quite as high tech as Leo's broadcaster box from JK Audio, but it is a pretty decent setup. In fact, I'm going to be using that telephone interface in just a moment. We have Richard on live, listening to this live right now as I'm recording this on TalkShoe. And if you want to see the picture of my telephone interface, I may actually use that. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So definitely go to generallyspeakingpodcast.com, click on the link on the menu for the show notes for the Podcast Answer Man, and you'll be able to see this wonderful telephone interface that I have. So let's see here. That is pretty much what I have for this show for you today. Future shows can be very much up to you if you're interested in sending in your questions, your audio comments, and feedback. I would love to hear from you. In fact, there are a lot of ways that you can get in touch with me. You can call our Generally Speaking listener line that is subject to change as far as the phone number, but at least for the first 30 days after this podcast is released, it will be 859-795-1959. You can email me at cliff@ravenscraft.org. That's RAVENSCRAFT.org. And of course, our podcasts, all of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network podcasts, can be found on the web at www.generallyspeakingpodcast.com. And now, before I close this podcast down, I am actually going to switch my headset over to a special headset that I'm wearing to get our live called-in callers here. In fact, I'm going to unmute Richard, and I'm going to bring up his voice here. And this is going to sound a little weird on my end, but that's because I don't have Leo Laporte's little doohickey. Let's see here. Richard, can you hear me? Oh, hold on. Let's see if we can get Richard unmuted here. Richard, are you there? Oh, looks like we're having some issues with TalkShoe getting Richard on the line here. We're going to try it one more time. Richard is having some issues. Now, Richard is dialed in via Skype on TalkShoe, and that is not... I will tell you that TalkShoe does not like Skype very much. And so, for some reason, I'm unable to get Richard in here right now. Yep. So with that, I'm I apologize. I'm going to bring that back down. And anyway, that well, first episode of the Podcast Answer Man, and the Podcast Answer Man can't even get this thing to work right. So I do apologize for that little technical glitch, but one of the things that I want to encourage any podcaster out there to do is not to be afraid of trying anything. I mean, well, okay, there are some things perhaps you might want to stay away from, but don't be afraid of failure in your podcast, and don't think that you have to edit everything out. There are going to be some philosophies of podcasting that I think that I'll share in some future episodes. But just what I want to do is I want to ask you to subscribe to this show. Go to generallyspeakingpodcast.com. You can subscribe to the show there. And do give us a call. Give us a call on the listener line at area code 859-795-1959. Or you can email me at cliff@ravenscraft.org. Tell me if you like the show. Tell me if you have an idea of something you want me to answer or discuss. And I'd love to hear from you. And that's pretty much all I have now. And so I'm going to end this with my really funky sounding bumper to take us out of this show.